yet another episode of The Speaking Citizen. I am your host, Mehru Jafar. I try to bring to you creative members of society like writers, poets, actors, and film and theatre personalities. Today, The Citizen talks to a publisher, Trisha Niyogi of Niyogi Books. Niyogi Books is in the news for having launched last April a queer book of fiction, Entering the Maze, the queer literature of Krishan Gopal Malik, translated from the original Bengali by Niladri R. Chatterjee. Welcome, Trisha. My first question to you is, as we meet today at the tail end of Pride Month, how did you celebrate the Pride Month of June this year?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great honor to be here because I've been watching the show for a really long time now, since it was started. But since we are in Pride Month, as a cisgender woman, I think support and solidarity is one of the biggest way we could celebrate and celebrate Pride Month. We all know that the Pride events are not really directed towards cisgender people, but allies are always welcome. So we are glad that we could be a part of it. I could be a part of it and express my support for them through not just my books, not just the book that we have launched recently, but also on a personal note. On every day with all that is happening, I'm constantly reading and making myself more aware of the demands of the time and what is happening right now, what are the biases that are happening and things like that. So first of all, we be aware of what is happening, and that's our little way of supporting and expressing ourselves during Pride Month and the rest of the year as well.
So why, Trisha, is it so important to you that queerness be normalized in society? What are the benefits for all society?
Okay, better late than never, but earlier this month, when we were preparing ourselves to launch the book Entering the Maze in Kolkata, I had to read up a lot more. You can't launch a book without knowing the background and the situation we are in right now. So I read a lot more, and I was surprised to know that the term homosexuality actually came before the word heterosexuality. In 1901, we'll talk about heterosexuality. In 1901, it was defined as abnormal or perverted appetite towards the opposite sex. So even heterosexuality was not seen in a positive light back then. In 1923, it was defined as morbid sexual passion for one of the opposite sex. Again, still until 1923, it was considered a wrong. It was only until 1934 that heterosexuality was defined and given the meaning as we know it today, manifestation of sexual passion for one of the opposite sex, normal sexuality. Now, we saw this happen because of the retaliation, because of the fights that was happening in the 1920s to normalize heterosexuality. And what we see now, the normalization of homosexuality, started in the 1980s. I think this retaliation is important. Otherwise, we will be living in a very biased world. Feminism would not make sense, nor will our fight for Dalit rights. It won't make sense at all. So I think the othering needs to stop, and we need to normalize even queerness in our fight for an unbiased life.
But who gave these definitions of homosexuality and heterosexuality? Was it the colonial diktat, or was it because we our ancient past was quite attracted, to homosexual activities. If you look at the sculptures at Khajuraho, if you look at the text of Kama Sutra, if you look at a lot of poetry written by poets like Amir Khusro in the 13th century, openly expressing his love for his mentor and beloved Nizamuddin Aulia. So who in the early 20th century was redefining heterosexuality?
So this started around the 1868-69 when the terms were coined. And true, it is a very colonial import. Now, when I talked about the definitions, I found exact dictionaries. I have not written down the name of the first dictionary, but the second 1923 definition, it was in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. So it is a very colonial impact. Our society and many other societies were open to it. They didn't shun somebody for their sexuality, but it's been happening today. And that's why sometimes I feel that we need to go back in time and revisit ourselves on these things. And definitely colonialism, patriarchy, all of them put together have impacted us and created such definitions over time.
So when conservative forces in our society today stand up against the homosexual community, it's actually standing up for Victorian values, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But that's also one phase. There is this term which I recently realized. It's called minority stress. Now, it's a stress which is caused to people who are in the minorities, and specifically people who now identify themselves as LGBTQ. Now, this kind of stress perhaps was there back then as well. But today we are seeing expression of these problems. People do not want to live in those closed quarters. And I think they're more open to also express. So while it is being suppressed, it's also being expressed. If you hold something very tight, it'll come out of your fingers, right? So I think that is also happening. People are retaliating and coming out more strongly than ever today. And I'm glad that's happening.
So you have been long a proponent of publishing more books on queer subjects. What is your opinion of literature and films that have been made, films made and literature written and available today that gives a better insight into the queer community?
Not just queer, I also support feminism, Dalit, and minority voices of all kinds. I recently did a book on growing up Jewish in India. Now we know the Jewish community is a minority in our country as well. So I think there are great stories. We are missing out on those stories, and as a result, the inclusivity in our lives is going down. To be more inclusive, not just in our where we live and grow as a publisher. I think in my organization as well, it is important that we are inclusive. Though we have had members from the LGBT community. By the way, I don't think that's supposed to be an identity which bothers me, but for the sake of, or I think I need to know, my people who work with us in the Niyogi Books family are on merit base. We do not consider any of these preferences to be a part of, or a qualifying factor or a negating factor to work with us. But this month as well, we've floated a special opening for people identifying themselves as LGBTQA plus to sensitize us. Now, why am I talking about sensitizing us within the organization is also because we feel a lot of these subjects are not appropriated or appropriated correctly. The authentic voice many times goes missing. Now, when we talk about books, we have some great literature. We have I love Cobalt Blue by Sachin Kundalkar. Then there is Kari by Amruta Patil. There is Queeristan by Parmesh Sahani. Ruth Vanita's Memory of Life. These are some of my favorites. But the absolute favorite, which is beyond doubt for many of us, is Lihaf by Ismat Chugtai. But it was banned not because it was queer, but because it was feminist literature, and it talked about expressing sexuality which was not right according to society. So when we talk about the queer literature also, there are various intersections with masculinity studies, with feminism, and so more. I think literature is being able to tackle the subjects much more well than movies in India today. Of course, there are some great movies, but I think literature is able to tackle the subject better. Now we have, when you talk about movies, there was a time when they were not considered in the mainstream actors. And even today, a lot of these queer ideas or queer stories or queer characters, which were on the movie front, are played by cisgender people. My question is, why can't people who live that life play that life on the real screen as well? Now, it's fair enough for an actor to take up that role, great, but we need more actors from the community for better, maybe more authentic representation. And I think we have a long way to go when it comes to queer movies. Now we know about, I think, this movie, right? I just forgot the name. Faraz Ansari's Sheer Korma. I think it's wonderful.
Yes.
It's one of the best I have seen, but that's one odd out of so many. So there is a lot of scope. There is a lot of scope of improvement, and I see it happening in due course of time.
But they're wonderful heterosexual straight people like Hansal Mehta, for example. I was very impressed about the way he made this film called Bai with Tanuja. It was a short film which was part of, I think, Modern Love, the Mumbai Stories. I don't know if you saw it. And then, of course, the classic Aligarh, so beautiful. Did you see Aligarh?
Yes, it's one of my, Manoj Vajpayee's Aligarh. I think one of my favorite again. So I'm saying there are one odd examples which have done extremely well. And of course, even if they are not people on the stage, they need to be referred. LGBTQ people need to be referred and to create something like that, because they live that life. As a person.
Yes, you have Onir, who is
doing great work.
Yes, so he or I think Apurva Ansari, who wrote the story and the dialogues of Aligarh, which is such a sensitive, caring film.
I remember when it was coming out, I was in college back then, and that was with Endemol. It came out with Endemol. Endemol was promoting it, and I got to see it before it got released, and I was in awe of that movie. But then it did not do that well as it needed to do well, and it's not
the queer-oriented films have done well at the box office. This is a pity.
Yeah.
But I suppose we have to first change our mindset. Now, going back to Ismat Chughta's Lihaf, for example, I think Lihaf also annoyed the patriarch because it projected a female pleasure,
Yeah.
which is like a non-topic or a non-issue in the patriarch's mind. Uh, Female pleasure has been completely
Yeah.
ignored in society. So I think that was also a grudge against Lihaf, that
Yeah.
how can women be so shameless as to
Yes.
enjoy sexuality, I think.
Freedom to express sexuality, and that was one of the reasons. But
Yeah.
when we talk about LGBTQ literature, I think I missed out in the beginning. We missed out books like The Truth About Me or Hijra Life
Mm.
by A. Revti, life story, which was extremely important. Me, Hijra, Me, Lakshmi, that was another very important book.
Yeah.
I think they're great stories, but there needs to be better execution when it comes to literature or creative aspects. And we need to work on that. I'm not saying that it's not happening, it is happening, but we need to work on it. And I think with each passing day, we'll get better at doing something. Experience is something which makes us better. So,
You have to
yes.
reach a stage when your reader demands of you as a publisher to give you more stories about the queer community, I think.
Yeah. But having said that, it's not just demand. Sometimes you have to create the demand. You
Yes.
have, as a publisher, it's not that we publish everything which is demanded. If we were to do only that, we would never be able to create anything new or give anything new. So even this book, Entering the Ways, is different in its ways. I'll speak about it later, but it's different when it comes to queer literature as well.
Well, my
Uh,
next question to you is, how did you discover Niladri, Professor Chatterjee, and Krishna Gopal Malik? I mean, and also tell me what you think is so great about the two.
Okay. Now the thing is that I didn't discover him; they discovered us. Um,
Okay.
the thing is that Niladri, we worked with Niladri earlier as well. This is the second book with us. The first book was called Nari Bhav, Androgyny and Female Impersonation
Yeah.
in the Arts. So now, and the cover had Chapal Bhaduri on the top, and it was a beautiful cover. I don't have the book; it got stocked out
I've seen,
again, and so we are printing it, reprinting it again. So it'll be out in the market next month. But that was the first book that we worked on, and there was interesting articles by Alka Pandey and many other people. We were talking about Ardhanarishwar and things like that. But then the second book came, and
yeah,
that's Entering the Maze.
yeah,
Um, Interestingly, and it's very interesting to work with Niladri because of various reasons. He's a professor of gender studies and in Kalyani University. But interesting part about is that he started a course called New Gender Studies in
mm,
2008. And he started a Facebook group as well to talk about for his students. And he's been teaching for the last 25 years now for his students. But then it became immensely popular with 16,000 followers on it. So not just um, Kalyani University, but students all across the country could access a lot of things. Now, what's interesting about new gender studies is because it also talks about masculinity studies as a part of uh, apart from queer literature as well. When you study gender studies, queer literature forms a part, and then masculinity studies. And not many universities in India still teach masculinity studies. So he talked about all of these things, how um, even some male are being is being discriminated, and that's a part of masculinity studies as well. So this entire gamut, he redesigned the course in 2008, and it was one of the most opted option in the university run till 2010. till pre-COVID. And it's still one of the, it's I think the second right now, but it's still one of the most popular subjects. So that is one very interesting thing, especially also if there's an interesting point which I've been still trying to figure out. How many men do you see in gender studies, teaching gender studies? Very few. Very few. I know only of one. Of course, there may be many. There may be some, but on the forefront, there are hardly any we know of, right on the top of our hat, right? And so Niladri discovered Krishna Gopal Mullik. And when he was discussing with the students and friends, and he discovered Krishna Gopal Mullik. An interesting part about this Krishna Gopal Mullik is that he was married and had a family, but he wrote in one of his novellas that I am 112% homosexual.
Yes.
He didn't use the word gay or queer. He used the word homosexual, which today is seen in a different light, but it didn't mean to be so. Right. And he was an editor with one of the leading newspaper, most likely Statesman. And then suddenly, at a drop of a hat, he was wearing suit and everything, he left everything and became a publisher and an editor. He published magazines and little magazines and so many stuff. And it is only very late in 1980s that he started writing. And he openly wrote about queer at the backdrop of Kolkata and stuff. So it's very interesting how this book and his writings are all about fun. It's actually how he's having fun writing it. It's not tracing the problems as much as we say the fight. It's not dark. It's pure fun. He's written for his own pleasure. He's just written for fun. So now that's why this book is different, because when you read it, it's not being a human has its ups, has its darkness and the lightness as well. So this book represents the lightness of being queer. And it's superb because you will end up laughing while you're reading this book.
No, it seemed Malik had faced no social backlash. His wife was respectful, continued to be loving. His son is fine. His daughter-in-law is fine with whatever he was. And I think Professor Chatterjee says in the introduction how Malik's stories redefined Bengali masculinity. And this is what attracted him to, to look at the Bengali masculine person, from a different angle.
Yeah.
And of course, the joy of being accepting of who you are. So I don't know how Malik entered, this very happy state of mind, where he could be a family man and also pursue his pleasures with such ease. That is so amazing. So, Trisha, in the past, you said that legal recognition is fine. We are the countries on the threshold of another hearing on legalizing same-sex marriages. But as far as you are concerned, you said social acceptance and, the change of the mindset of society is also very important, apart from legal recognition of the rights and equality of queer people. So how do you as a publisher, and how do ordinary citizens make the homosexual community feel a little more at home and at peace in our midst?
Interesting. Is because I don't know. I don't think I have made any special effort. I've just been myself.
Yes.
And I have a lot of friends, and I love them to bits. Um, their sexuality is of no concern to me. You are living your life, I am living my life. It's how we connect with each other that matters more.
Connect as human beings, yes.
And human beings. But the question of social acceptance over legal, of course, legal is very important to actually legitimize any thing. Um, there was this one book that I did, which was a Shet Pature Thala, which is about a widowed woman and how she was expected to give up meat and everything and wear only whites and not go about anything and things like that. And by Bani Bashu. That was one of the most important stories I read, wherein the protagonist said, for my child, I'm going to live a life. I'm going to wear colors. I want to go out. I want to eat whatever I want. I want to work and raise my child. So she broke away from a patriarchal family and did the necessary things. And the society used to backlash even after she got success. So I'm saying from a woman perspective, as a woman also has gone through so many things, being a widow or anything, you've seen so many as for that matter, even divorce is seen as a taboo. Right. So when you see all of those things, you tend to empathize and also understand what the taboos can do to them. So it's simple as that. If we can all just, that's why I said social acceptance is very important. That is how we can change or how we can make them more comfortable with us and just connect human to human. It's not bothering you. It's not affecting you. Their sexuality is no concern to you. It's not bothering you. Why are you being bothered by it?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Trisha, for talking to the citizen. It was a wonderful, wonderful conversation.
Thank you for having me. I've always wanted to express myself on this topic because I feel it's sometimes it becomes very it boils inside your head. It happens. It's a struggle in your own head that why is it happening? But to be able to express also clarifies a lot of things within us. We also feel that what all we can do. So thank you for doing this also. I think it's also given me a lot more ideas to work on and make progress in what I'm doing already. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about it.
Absolutely. Thank you.